All right. I want to thank you guys for joining me today. I'm so excited about my next guest. Really, we have never met before, but I feel like I'm really getting to know him through technology, snafus, and you name it, right? So, my guest is Ben Gay the Third. Really excited to have him today. Such a wealth of information and knowledge. I'm really excited to hear his insight and how we can pivot and move forward during these challenging times. So many of us are just stressed out about what does the future hold for us in 2020 in lieu of this pandemic, racial tensions, and everything else. So at this time, I'm going to give Ben the opportunity to introduce himself, and then we're going to get into the interview.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I appreciate it. Uh, I'm Ben Gay III, a Southerner, full-time professional Southerner, currently in exile in California. I've been out here 55 years now, but I still feel like I could make a break for it at any time and get back to the South. If you meet me on an airplane and say, where are you from? I say Atlanta. It takes two or three more questions for me to admit that I really live in California currently. Uh, but I'm speaking of the pandemic and all, I'm a little older than most of you listening, and a lot older than you are, Michelle, probably old enough to be your grandfather. But uh,
You look good. Okay.
therefore, I've been through a little bit in my life. I was conceived on December 7th, 1941, as my father was called back to the naval base, and they decided to have one last hug. So I'm one of the few people who know the day he was conceived, Pearl
Wow.
Harbor Day. Dad said that there were two horrible things that befell America that day: Pearl Harbor and my conception. So we survived. But I said that to say this: when I moved to Atlanta, my first friend there, I was 6 years old, was a gentleman named Arthur, who had been
Hmm.
born in the slave shack across the street from
Wow.
where we live, behind what was called the Jarvis Mansion. That was
Mm,
about all that was left, the house and some property around it. It used to be hundreds, if not thousands of acres. But Arthur was born in the slave shack, a slave, and
wow.
still lived in it in 1948. Now he had his own mule, a wagon. He went around the neighborhood plowing up things and so on. And he was literally my first friend and my buddy. And
Wow.
he even told me, he said, I'm saying all this to say the pandemic doesn't have me scared, nor does the economic situation, nor does the racial unrest and so on. I've been through it. I was in
Hmm.
Atlanta during the civil rights era.
Hmm.
Uh, and Arthur used to take me in his wagon up to the Confederate soldiers' home. There still
Wow.
was one, and say, go in there and talk to them. You need to hear that side of it too. And so I would go in and talk to people who fought at Gettysburg and Bull Run, and
Wow.
so on. So I didn't appreciate at the time what an
Yeah.
interesting time it was to grow up in, but that enables you to have a little, when you knew people who fought in the Civil War,
Yeah.
who were born at the start of World War II, knew a lot of people in the neighborhood from World War One. That was sort of common. They weren't old, doddering people yet.
Hmm.
And then you go through numerous national sicknesses and ups and downs and recessions and presidents I liked and presidents I didn't like, and so on. And then here we all are, and we're
Yeah.
all going to be here shortly after this situation is over. These situations are over, and we're going to be fine. This is a wonderful place, a great country. And
Yeah.
if you know anybody who's got a little age and wisdom on them, be sure and talk to them, because they can give you a little more perspective. I'm a salesman, a sales trainer, a book writer. I write books on how to sell and everything. And I got started in selling when I won a red Columbia bicycle selling donuts in a fundraiser door to door. Not donuts, Krispy Kreme donuts, the best on earth.
The cream of the crop, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then I owned a lawn mowing service starting when I was 14. My father made me go mow lawns. I mowed one or two and went into retirement. And he explained to me that wasn't a suggestion, it was a requirement of continuing to sleep in the house and eat there.
Right.
So we worked out a little battle plan, and what I wound up doing was I sold the jobs, which most people weren't willing to do. I inspected them, I collected the money. I told the customers, pay us anything you want and whatever you think it's worth. And then I split it with the people who did the work, which scared me in the beginning. But Dad said, don't worry, they'll pay you more than you would have ever asked. Well, they paid 2 or 3 times more. So the
Wow.
mowers made more than they ever would have made, and I made more than if I'd ever mowed the lawns myself. And I had in the growing season 20, 25 kids working for me. So I was primed for selling. Everyone in my
Mhm.
family was a salesperson,
Mm.
aunts, uncles, everybody, and they all own their own businesses. So I didn't know any better. I was raised 2 blocks out the front gate of East Lake Country Club. So my father's golfing friends were the chairman of the board of Coca-Cola, whoever he or she was at the time, the people who
Wow.
started Home Depot. Every big company in America had an Atlanta office. Along with that office, frequently came membership at East Lake. So I
Mhm.
just grew up thinking everybody was doing well until I
Right.
was off on my own. And my father had told me that if he timed his death right, he would lunge into a candy machine with the last quarter or nickel, whatever was the coin of the realm at the time. And if I was there, I could pull the handle, not to look to him for any inheritance. So when I decided to get married, I suddenly went from a life of reasonable opulence. I had to work, but reasonable opulence to a little 2 room apart, not 2 bedroom, 2 room
Wow.
apartment in downtown Atlanta, and trying to put my wife through nursing school. And
Oh.
I realized I had to make some more money. So I answered a little ad, went through the employment thing, discovered there was nothing I was qualified to do
Mhm.
since I was barely a high school graduate and lasted 3 weeks in college.
Wow.
And I didn't know how to type, so that ruled out all the S's in the in
Right.
one ads. So I was down to psychologist, and I couldn't pronounce it, but I knew I wasn't one. So then I saw business opportunities. If you know anything about marketing plans, want to make more money, dial this number. So I did. I didn't know what a marketing plan was, but I wanted to make more money. And about 10, 15 minutes after answering that ad from a phone booth on Peachtree Street in Atlanta, I was standing in an office because he gave me 10 minutes to get there or told me never to dial the number again. I made the mistake of trying to interview him. And
Mm.
he cut that short by saying, Mr. Gay, I'm not the man standing in a phone booth answering want ads. So went in, saw the presentation. It was a multi-level marketing company, joined with my business partner and another gentleman we had just met in the lobby who'd answered the same ad. His name was Zig Ziglar. We met
Wow.
when he laughed at my name, and I'm used to that. So I turned around,
Right.
acknowledged the Ben Gay joke. I said, what's your
Right.
name? He said, Zig Ziglar. I said, with a name like Zig Ziglar, you're laughing at Ben Gay? You got to
Right.
be kidding. That day, I was handed by the gentleman who ran the ad a copy of Think and Grow Rich by Dr. Napoleon Hill, a recording by Earl Nightingale called The Strangest Secret. He said, you're young, you don't have a lot of experience. These ought to help you. I was 23, so to say I didn't have a lot of experience was
Mhm.
a kind way to phrase it. So I went home, started reading the book, listening to the record, and so on. Became the #1 distributor in the company and won uh, a national year-long sales contest. #1 prize was a mystery prize. #2 was a Rolls Royce. Zig won that. 3 was a
Wow.
Lincoln Continental. 4th was a Thunderbird, as best I recall. Then I was flown to California to be awarded the mystery prize and found out it was presidency of the company. And I
Wow.
said to the owner, William Penpatrick, why'd you make it a mystery prize? He said, in case somebody won it who I didn't like, then I would have changed it. You didn't know what you won.
Right. That's
So
good.
about 2 years after answering that ad, I was living in California, uh,
Mhm.
running as best I could run at that young age, but I was the president running what was quickly becoming an international company. It became the largest direct sales MLM in the world, bigger than Amway and Shackley combined at the time.
Wow.
And we took it up to $1 million a day. Today's money about $3.5 billion.
Wow.
So that's sort of my sales career in a capsule. I've done lots of selling. I've very, you almost couldn't name a product I haven't sold, including when I worked at Macy's, briefly, women's foundations. And somebody
Wow.
discovered that they probably shouldn't have a 20-year-old uh, gentleman whose hormones had not settled down in the bra department. So I was quickly moved to housewares. And then Bill and I had a parting of the ways, and I got fired at age 30. Freud said the worst things that can happen to a young man are turning 30, father dies, gets fired. All three happened within a 6-month period,
Mm,
which left me with a good deal of money in a lovely home in Marin County, the second, they argue about it, wealthiest county in the nation.
mhm,
And things are going well, but I was drumming my fingers and looking around, and that was not a good place to be
mhm.
young, rich, and nothing to do but start thinking about stuff and getting
Right.
in trouble. So I looked across San Francisco Bay, saw a smokestack sticking up, and remembered it was behind a hill, but that belonged to San Quentin State Prison. Went over, having set an appointment with the warden, Red Nelson, and sold him on my idea of starting a program there to teach people how to get out of prison quicker and stay out. The recidivism rate in the state of California at that time was 67% of the people that
Mm,
got out came back
mhm,
within 2 years. So we went to work on that. I had a proposal to get paid, I don't know what it was, 40,000 a year for it, which was a good deal of money back then.
mhm.
And he said he liked the idea. If I'd fill out about this much paperwork, he would push it through. And I looked at the paperwork, thought, I wonder if my secretary can do all of that, since I don't plan to do any of it. And
Right.
then I said, how long does pushing it through take? He said, oh, 2 years. I can get it done in 2 years. And I said, what if I did it for free? He said, we could start this afternoon. So that
Mm,
afternoon, I stood in front of my first people builders class, is what I called it, at San
mhm.
Quentin, in front of 200 or 300 people you wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley. And we began changing some lives of the people builders graduates. 12-week program, you could go through it again and again if you were still there, and
Mhm.
many were. But in the 12-week program, the recidivism rate of my graduates dropped from 67% to less than 5%.
Wow.
And I was officially in the people building business, which is what I've been doing ever since, primarily in sales. But life is life, and selling is selling. And so that pretty much sums me up.
That is amazing. And I guess the one thing is, people get hung up on the end goal, the dollar amount. So for you to make that switch and transition from 40,000 to doing it for free, what did you see was the value and how were you able to leverage that, to keep doing what you do and what you're known for?
Well, great question. I'm hardly ever asked that. I'm not sure I've ever been asked that.
Awesome.
It wasn't like a light bulb. Well, here's what I'll do. I
Right.
came there to teach a class at San Quentin, and the way to do that without waiting 2 years was to do it for free. So it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like, and then I'll do this and then I'll do that. But I'll tell you the answer to your question. It dawned on me slowly. Was one, I became known as the guy who went into San Quentin, into the bowels of criminality and so on, every week for 12 hours and did sort of scared straight. You remember that at Raleigh
Yeah.
State? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
they bring in young people and yell at them and scare them so they wouldn't want to go to prison. Well, this was young white millionaire goes into San Quentin and yells at them, the bad
Mm-hmm.
guys, to turn them into good guys. And
Mm-hmm.
so once that reputation started to spread, speaking engagements and consulting things started to flow. And
Wow.
then one of the greatest things I could do to somebody, I mean, that they appreciated the most, was invite them in as a guest speaker. And
Mm,
sometimes that was conditioned on, well, if I'm working with your company, I'd love to have you come in.
I see.
First, I work with your company, then you come in. So it was, I gave a talk right before the COVID-19 thing shut
Mm-hmm.
most speeches, I mean, seminars and all down, I gave a speech that I could trace back directly. I mean, this person told this person, I worked for this person who told this person. I could trace directly back to an article that ran in Air California in-flight magazine. Air California is gone. The magazine, of course, is
Mm.
gone. And the article had to have been over 50 years ago,
Wow.
or about 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And but that was about my work at San Quentin. And this guy calls and says, "Hi, you don't know me, but so and so said, and so and so said," and he gave me a reprint of the article from Air California magazine. A
Wow.
50-year-old article was
That's
still
awesome.
paying off
Yeah.
about the work I, and it had pictures of me going cell to cell recruiting to get people to come to the class. I
Wow.
used to tell them when I rattled their bars and said, "I want you to come to the class," I said, "Coming in here does not protect you from direct salespeople. We will track you down wherever you are." And so I met some interesting people there, some that
Yeah.
you really wouldn't want to meet. I sat in Charlie Manson's cell 3
Wow.
occasions. He asked to meet me. He couldn't come. He didn't play well with others, so he couldn't come to the class. I
Mm-hmm.
had to go to him to talk to him. But I spent about 9 hours with him, spread out over 3 interviews. So it's
Wow.
been an interesting life. In that year, I was attitude coach for the astronauts for Apollo 15, 16, 17,
That's
teaching
amazing.
people builders and chatting up Charlie Manson.
Wow.
So one of the things I would encourage people to do is go out of your way to meet interesting people. I have some of the most interesting friends you could ever imagine.
That's amazing. And then my thing is active listening. See, this is a good
Yes.
thing to kind of talk to people about in terms of being exposed to all those different platforms. What insight could you give people? Because a lot of people, even now, trying to help people through hard, difficult situations. What tips would you give them about active listening?
Well, one, be an active listener and observer. It was
Hmm.
said of Nelson Mandela, he was not only a great speaker and so on and did a lot of good, but I read one day, I was reading a book about him, and it said that Nelson Mandela was a dynamic listener. You
Mm,
wouldn't think those two words would go together, but he was in other words, listening was not a passive activity. It wasn't just being quiet. It
right.
was listening, leaning into the conversation, sopping it up. There was a poem during the hippie Summer of Love era when I came out here. The Summer of Love happened to be going on.
Hmm.
I didn't participate. I just watched it through limousine windows on the way to the airport. But there was a poem floating around called Desiderata, and it has
Hmm.
all sorts of things. You do your thing, I'll do my thing, and so on. It was hippy dippy, but one of the phrases in there really stuck with me. It said, "Even listen to the dull and ignorant. They too
Mm,
have their story." I
mhm,
learned a lot talking to Charlie Manson. Uh,
mhm,
one of the most famous madams in the world owned by the time I knew her, owned a restaurant in Sausalito. And I
mhm.
spent a lot of time just sitting at the bar where she reigned over the restaurant, talking to her and watching how she operated and so on. She was a doctor's wife came up to her one day and said, "Sally, I'm the wife of Doctor So and So. Do you do you know him?" And I said, "No, I've never heard the name." Uh, and she, "Oh yeah, but he says," and she said, "I'm really sorry. I don't mean to be rude. I never heard his name." And the lady left, and I said to her, "Sally, I bet you knew that person."
Mhm,
She said, "My wife was in the restroom at the time. It was my first wife who's passed away now." But
mhm.
Sally said, "Ben, if Marcia came out of that bathroom right now, sat down next to me at the bar, and said, 'Do you know Ben Gay?' I would say, 'Never heard of him.'" So I learned there, you don't have to say everything you know all the time, which I
Right.
have had a tendency to do from time to time.
Mhm,
She
mhm.
taught me that you learn more from listening. And I would put after listening, observing. When I walked
Right.
into Charlie Manson's cell the first time, it was a 2 bunk cell. He lived on the bottom bunk. The top bunk he used as a bookshelf or where he put his clothes and stuff because he didn't have
Mhm.
lockers and so on.
Mhm.
And he had a single cell because other people really didn't want to go to sleep with Charlie Manson around.
Right.
And so he had his own cell. And I looked up on top of the bunk, and there was one book there, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Wow.
And I was looking around. There wasn't even the Gideon Bible, which most inmates had because I handed them one if
Right.
they never opened it. Never any book in his cell but How to Win Friends and Influence People. I said, what an interesting choice for reading material. And because
Mhm.
a good friend of mine was a friend of Dale Carnegie's. And
Mhm.
I said, well, why that book? He said, Ben, it was my Bible. I couldn't have built the Manson family without it.
Wow.
The
That's it.
techniques are the same,
Yeah. And that's
whether you're
one of the
trying to,
things you'll learn a lot by observing and listening because
right?
if you get caught up in your own mindset, you're not going to learn how to adapt and learn with other people. So,
Absolutely.
so many great things that you've done. Let's go back to the sales days with the Ziglar, the Heel, and the Nightingale. What advice do you think really reigns true today, even going back with all that history and knowledge, for people who are dealing with sales today that, could be key highlights to remember, regardless of what time span you're in?
The I'm not going to turn this into a commercial, but you answer a question, they deserve an answer. People say, Mr. Gay, I'd give anything in the world to know what you know about selling. I said, well, the good news is I wrote it down and it's
Mm.
available.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the Closers Part One, the best-selling book on selling and closing ever written. We sold over 10 million copies when we quit counting 24 years ago or something like
Wow.
that. And now it's a whole series. Now, if you're interested, I'll send your people to a website where they can get it at a discount,
Yeah.
free shipping, and so on. But anyway, I wrote it all down. To answer your question in the short form, not much has changed in selling. The
Hmm.
border collies have changed. We round up the sheep differently than we used to. If I'd
Hmm.
had social media when I was building Holiday Magic or helping to build Holiday Magic, I would now be the benevolent dictator of the world. We
Hmm.
got it up to $1 million a day, $3.5 billion in today's dollars. That's billion with a B.
Wow.
Driving around in cars, picking up people one at a time, and sometimes they wouldn't be there. They'd answer the door in the pajamas because they forgot about the meeting or claim they forgot. And you had
Right.
to round them up one at a time, put them in your car, drive them down, sit them through an hour and a half meeting or an hour meeting, half hour closing probably. And in spite of that, I went from $100 a week to $40,000 a month part
Wow.
time. I didn't give up my daytime job until my father fired me. He said, you don't need this job. You're making 40,000 a month part time, which is about a half a million in today's dollars.
That's
Part
something.
time a month.
Yeah.
And so, but once you're talking to someone, either writing to them on the computer or talking to them via Zoom or what email, whatever,
Hmm.
selling is selling. I don't say or do anything significantly different today than I did then. The difference is now I figure I've talked face to face to about 2.5 million people in total in 5,000 paid appearances over these years, plus
Right.
another 1,000 probably for free. Zig used to say Ben Gay would work a traffic accident. Wherever two or more are gathered together, I was there to explain to you why you ought to join my company. so,
That's good.
so
Hey, you got to persevere. Look, you got to be your own cheerleader sometime, right?
absolutely. So the secret is there is no secret. You come early,
Hmm.
you stay late, you work on weekends, especially in the beginning. 85% of all the problems in selling go away if you pick to sell a quality product or service that's competitively priced. Doesn't have to be the
Hmm.
cheapest, competitively priced, and you spend your time talking to qualified people, qualified to
Hmm.
buy it, physically, religiously, financially, whatever,
Hmm.
qualified to buy your product. And if you do
Hmm.
that, Then you're just down to learning how to present. That's called scripting. And salespeople, oh, I don't want a script. Learn a script. If you've been in selling over 30 days, you're on a script. You're already saying
Mhm.
the same thing in the same situations over and over and over again. So what I'm advocating is not scripting. You're already doing that. I'm advocating a quality script that has been tested
Mm.
and refined and so on down to the point. For instance, we've been sitting there casually talking. You've
Mhm.
changed the question several times.
Mhm.
Come up with a different question. My answers, however, except for how'd you make the shift at San Quentin, that was a new one, going from no money to turning into money,
Right.
monetizing it. I think that's the first time I've been asked that. All the other
Mhm.
questions somebody has asked me before, and all the
Mhm.
answers, if you played them over each other, it would sound like the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. They're scripted. I've learned how to successfully present an idea. So
Right.
they should do that if they're inclined to go into selling.
I love that. And that is so good. And so, I was listening to somebody the other day and they said if you begin to master answers, you're just learning one answer and practicing it, saying it several times over. I thought, now that's brilliant, right? So
Yeah.
that's the same thing with the script and certain things, you're mastering a technique and doing it 1,000 times, so that's a good philosophy. So, in building these businesses and selling, what are the tips that you would share with building the right kind of team? So you knew what your strengths were, but how do you identify what other what would be your game plan on how to strategically set up your team so that you can thrive and do what you do and they can thrive in what they do?
Pick something you like doing. The word passion gets over you.
Mhm.
What are you passionate about? I'm passionate
Mhm.
about Gigi, my wife. Beyond that,
Mhm.
it thins out real quick. After that, it's learning how to present something and being proud about presenting it, quality product
Mhm.
that's competitively priced to qualified people. So I would, if I were starting out today and wanted to build a business, I would find something I was excited about. And that excitement can mean lots of things. Excited because I think it's saleable, excited because
Mhm.
I think other people will like it, and so on. And then you don't have to be, most inventors go to their graves flat broke with their inventions in the garage because they didn't want to show them to anybody for
Mm.
fear they'd be stolen. I
Mhm.
am not a creative, inventive person, but I can look at things and see how they could be done better or a little differently or exactly like they're being done now, but with my name on it. I was in the
Mhm.
garage one day in one of our houses doing something, and this young kid came up with a squirt bottle of the magic spray on, take rust off of saws,
Oh,
stains
yeah,
off the
yeah.
driveway,
Mhm.
that type of thing, with
Mhm.
a great presentation. So he did his little razzle dazzle thing, and I said, okay, I'll take two. He said, well, this is concentrated. You don't need to. And I said, I do. One I'm gonna use here. The other one is I'm gonna give to a chemist friend of mine, and we're gonna duplicate it, and I'm gonna sell it under a different name. And I know what to say. I just heard your presentation. So I gave the bottle to Mort Scott, who designed most of our cosmetic products. I sent the bottle to him and I said, can we duplicate this? About 20 minutes after he got the bottle, he said, I got the formula. What do you want to do? I said, find a private label guy to do it. And he said, whoever's doing it now is doing it private label. So let's look on the back of the bottle. He got the address. It was down in the Bay Area. I sent someone down to go dumpster diving, and sure enough, there were the boxes from the private label company that they
Mhm.
unpacked and repacked, including what they were paying for it, old invoices and packing slips and so on.
Wow.
So we knew. Pardon me, the phone is
Okay.
going off. I hope you can't hear that,
Oh, we can. It's fine.
but I wear hearing aids.
Okay.
So even if I have it muted, it's not muted my hearing aids.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So probably best would be to turn it off.
Okay.
Anyway, so we duplicated the formula. Mort did that almost instantly. and we found who was already making it anyway.
Wow.
And so I called the private label guy, want to have it done for us. And he said, okay. And he said, what unique characteristics do you want? I said, I want the unique characteristics that are in the bottle I just bought. Uh, and he says, oh, okay. Any changes? And I said, yeah, theirs is pink, so it won't be so obvious. Make ours blue. So I
Wow.
made it blue. I then went back to a training class that I was teaching that week called Advanced Business Training. And it happened to
Mhm.
be the third advanced business training we had taught. So it was called
Mhm.
ABT3. So I
Mhm.
went into them, told them the story. I said, I got to name this thing. I want it to sound, powerful and so on. You have 30 minutes. Before you go to lunch, I want to know what we call this brainstorming and
Mhm.
masterminding, as Dr. Hill had taught me. And so I waited 30 minutes, came back in. I said, what are we going to call it? And they said ABT3. They named it after themselves, but if you don't know it's from advanced business training, it sort of has a powerful chemical name to it. So it
Wow.
became ABT3. So I'm standing in my garage, a guy comes up, does the squirt thing, charges me $19.95 either each or for both of them. I really don't recall, but it was about
Mhm.
20 bucks. Uh, a gang of 20 people sitting in the class named it. Mort Scott broke the code, but it turned out we didn't need to. We just need to go dumpster diving. And we built a multi-million-dollar business in less than a year.
Wow.
So it doesn't see what I mean. You don't have to be a creative, inventive person. Take something that's already going on and make it better. Henry
Mhm.
Ford didn't invent the automobile; it was already being built. And he didn't invent the. You did it too. I'm happy that your phone went off.
Like
He
mind, look, great minds do the same thing, right?
made the
Look,
same
I'm
mistakes.
enjoying this.
He didn't invent the assembly line. He perfected the assembly line.
Right.
So that, and Henry Ford said, if I'd asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So
Right.
sometimes you have to go off track. When Steve Jobs came out with the iPhone, which sort of looked like this, I guess this is a newer one.
Yeah.
But when he first came out with that, phones had been around for a while. When I started the 800 call center industry, people said, "How did you invent that?" I said, "Well, phones already invented. 800 numbers were already in use, but not by people. Timeshare, however, was in campground membership had just started. I didn't work in that field, so what I did was I took the existing phone, the ineffective old answering service where everybody had to have their own phone number, so you had 800 cords sticking out,
Mhm.
had everybody call one number, an 800 number cost $10,000 a month up front for one number for 240 hours. So nobody had an 800 number.
Mhm.
When I started the National Communication Center, something like 90% of all Americans didn't know it was free to call an 800 number.
Wow.
They would speak loud because it was long distance. They remembered calling grandmother, and they would talk fast because they wanted to keep the bill down. They assumed they were paying for it. So
Right.
I took telephones that existed, answering services that existed, 800 numbers that existed, and I time shared them. We all
Wow.
dialed the same phone number, 800-824-7888. I still have it. I still get occasional calls on it. When the
Wow.
business was in business, we got 60,000 calls a day. 40
Wow.
some odd years later, 44 years, 34 years later, I'm now down to 4 or 5 calls a day. People still flipping through old magazines, and I know most of the names. Is this Woodmaster? I said, no, it's
Right.
not, but I know why you're calling. Did you dial 800 824? Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Well, you got to get some new magazines. Uh, why do you say that? Well, the magazine you're holding in your hand has to be 34 years old. Might be
Wow.
older than that. Has to be 34. But see what I mean? That's the
Yeah.
spray thing, the answering service thing. Almost everything I've done, cosmetics already existed before I joined Holiday Magic. There were
Right.
1,500 cosmetic companies in America the day I joined Holiday
Mhm.
Magic. But we just put little twists on it and marketed it differently. And here's the joy about selling. If you're standing on someone's doorstep selling your cosmetics door to door, it
Mhm.
sounds old fashioned, but people still do it.
Mhm.
selling your cosmetic. There are not 1,500 cosmetic companies in America. There's one. It's you on that doorstep. That's who they're thinking about.
That's
So
awesome.
understand the importance of you. One of my friends in the home improvement, and a client in the home improvement business, said to me one day braggadociously, Ben, I have 300 employees. Most of them are salespeople. I said, no, you don't. You have one, the one standing in front of your customer now. They don't know about the other 299 and they don't care.
This is so
And
true.
it's the quality of that person's presentation. Flip side of quality
Mhm.
presentation, a lady calls her neighbor, my friends, people are out at the house doing something, new roof, gutters, something. And the
Mhm.
friend calls the neighbor and said, would it interest you to know that there's someone urinating on your air conditioner unit? He'd gone around the corner of the house, thought he was out of sight. So a man, the whole world is a urinal, and began going on her air conditioning unit. When Hugh told me the story, I said, see, you don't have 300 employees, you have one, and it just cost you a $40,000 job.
Yeah.
So
That's
it's
that's
you.
some good stuff.
When I start seminars frequently, I'll say to them, uh, Lewis and Clark were sent out to discover see what was here, what
Mhm.
did we have to work with.
Mhm.
Napoleon Hill was sent out by Schwab to find out why successful people were successful, go call on my
Mhm.
friends and so on. And I said, I was sent out in 1965 to find out what made salespeople succeed or not succeed. I have the
Mhm.
answer. I'm back from my journey. It's you.
Right. That is so good. That's
Yeah.
some good stuff right there. Now, for people who are, you are that salesperson, you are with this company. And as you mentioned before, you had your mentor who gave you that book and those recordings. What do you think is the most important thing to remember when it comes to self improvement and development? What is it that is the key thing to help you move forward in your line of business?
Uh, I'm frequently asked, what would you say to the young Ben Gay
Mm-hmm.
if you could talk to him? And the answer is get serious sooner.
Mm,
Uh, for instance, I joined that company September 15th, 1965. For the
mm-hmm.
first 6 months, I didn't make any money. I had my
Mm.
inspirational book. I had my inspirational record. I don't mean I didn't make any profit. I didn't make any money. No money changed hands. My
Wow.
mother and sister apparently didn't buy a tube of lipstick. Not a dime changed hands. And
Right.
one day I went to a meeting at the Georgian Terrace Hotel where we had our opportunity meetings, walked in, and Bill Dempsey, the guy who recruited me and gave me the books, called me over and he said, Ben, I need to talk to you. And I said, okay, what? Mr. Personality's here. I was voted wittiest in my senior class in high school. I don't like to brag about that. But Mr. Witty walked over. What can I do for you, Bill? And he said, I don't want you coming to the meetings anymore. I said, what? What have I done wrong? He said, oh, you haven't done anything wrong, but you didn't learn the scripts I gave you on how to recruit people, how to invite them to the meeting. I gave them to you when I gave you the book and the record. You've never learned it. I don't think you've ever looked at it. So you don't bring anybody to the meeting. So it's sort of a waste of your time. Then, because you're here every night, other people think you're doing well. So when they're having trouble closing their prospects, they raise their hand, which means come help me. And you run over because you're so friendly, but you haven't learned the closing scripts, the
Wow.
closes. So you not only didn't bring anybody, you run their prospects off. And I'm sure not going to trust you at the front of the room giving the meeting itself. That was a 47-minute word for word presentation. And frankly, you're starting to depress people. I said, I've been gay and depressed have never been in the same sentence ever.
Wow.
He said, well, they are now. I said, all right. By then, Rucker and I were $5,000 in, $50,000 in today's money. We're each making $100 a week working for my father. We couldn't afford not to come to the meetings and not
Right.
to make money. It wasn't an option. I said, how do I
Mm-hmm.
fix it? He said, do you still have the scripts I gave you? And I said, yeah, I still have the stack of stuff you gave me. He said, memorize the presentations, all three, how to get them here, how to give it from the front of the room, and what to say after the meeting. And then when you can stand in front of my desk and give me all three of those, it was about an hour and a half, word for word material grand total. Stand in front of my desk and give it to me word for word. Then you can come back to the meeting. So a week or 10 days later, I had done it. I called him, went down, stood in front of his desk, did it all. He said, good. Now that you've memorized the recruiting speech, go out and say that to some people, preferably people that don't know what a flake you are. Just go say it to, So I went out and said it to some people, and a night or two later, walked into the Georgian Terrace Hotel with five buying units. So a couple is one, a single man is one,
Mm-hmm.
five buying units. Somebody else gave the meeting from the front of the room. He didn't trust me with that yet. I
Right.
can understand why. The movie was shown, the lights came up, turned to the person who brought you here and asked how you could get started. And I was sort of startled to see when the lights came up, all five units were still there, that
Wow.
they had come at all, that they were still there. So I got out my handy dandy legal pad and started drawing circles like they do at most level marketing meetings, and which position best suits your needs. And all five uh, picked one and said they were in.
Wow.
Four wrote checks, and one I think needed 2 or 3 days, but it was 5 out of 5.
Mm.
I made uh, $15,000 in about an
Wow.
hour and a half. Working for my father, that was 3 years' pay,
Wow.
and because I had learned the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
And 18 months after that, I won a national sales contest, beat Zig Ziglar, and was president of the company. So
That's amazing.
I finally got serious. I could have done all that 6 months sooner. I probably
Right.
could have graduated from college if I'd gotten serious. I probably would have
Right.
been thrown out of 2 high schools if I'd gotten serious sooner. So for me, it is, and probably for a lot of other people, get serious. If you're in selling, this is a highly paid profession. Those of us
Mm-hmm.
at the top of it make more than doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists and almost anything you could name.
Mm-hmm.
We make as much or more than they do. That's
Yeah.
worthy of being serious about. And I was just sort of skipping through life on a handshake, a smile, and shiny shoes.
Right. That is so good. I love that whole thing. And really it's an essence of implementing what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
How
Yeah,
many people are still reading, going to these seminars, and then not practicing it when they get home? You
yep,
know what I mean?
absolutely.
So that really is amazing. Well, I just want to thank you so much for your time. You have just been there's so many more questions I could ask them. We just have to have another interview because
I'd love to
even
do
like
it
the
with you.
masterminding, I mean, to the people that you were fortunate to be in front of and to have those moments of brainstorming, with Zig Ziglar and Heel and Nightingale. I mean, that's just, unprecedented, really. You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
make it happen. I didn't meet these people by accident. The first couple were accidental, but then I began to see the value of reaching out and touching people and so on. I didn't meet Sally Stanford, the San Francisco madam, by accident. I read a story about her, knew that she owned a restaurant called Valhalla in Sausalito, went
Hmm.
in, walked right up to her and said, hi, I'm Ben Gay. We're going to be good friends.
That's amazing. So having that confidence and just going after it and doing it.
Yeah, and seeing the benefit of it. If every
Yeah.
time I did that, somebody I got slapped in the face and there was no reward, I probably would have given up on it.
Right.
But I have,
Right.
you know, high school graduate attitude coach for the astronauts.
Hmm.
I mean, how does that figure? You
Yeah.
got to know people, know the value of listening to them, talking to them, observing what they're up to. And in selling, one last thing, I know you got to go, but one last thing in selling, if you walk into a new situation, find out who's already succeeding there honestly. If somebody dishonest there, stay away from them. But find out quickly who is succeeding honestly,
Yeah.
and glue yourself to their back until you
Mm-hmm.
find out why they're exceeding. Honestly, there's a guy named Ali Rita who sells automobiles. He broke a 40-year standing all-time yearly sales record. 40 years it stood. And in 1917, he sold, 2017, excuse me, he sold 1,582 cars in a year. Do the math, you'll discover that's rather astounding. It's over 6 cars a
Wow.
day. Many people
Wow.
in the car business don't sell 6 cars a month. And he's a very religious person. He does not work on weekends at all, ever, and no religious holidays. So it's really probably closer to 10 cars a day, every
Wow.
day, day in and day out. And if you and I wanted to walk into his dealership right now and buy a car, they would send us away or to another salesperson. Ali doesn't have time for walk-ins or what's called ups.
Wow.
He only works now with people that made an appointment, were referred to him by an existing customer or an existing customer returning for their fourth, fifth, sixth, 10th car. That's
Wow.
how you. So if I was going to go into car selling, I would fly to Detroit, and if I had to pretend like I was a customer reading a magazine, I would find out what Ali is saying and doing.
Wow. That's great advice, and I think, that's where the peace comes with investing into yourself, because you're investing in finding a master, someone who is well versed in what they're doing, and they're showing you all the ins and outs. And it's up to you to decide how bad you want it to determine how successful you can be to obtain it.
Yeah,
So
and
I
that's
think
your
that's,
decision. Bill Dempsey
yeah.
told me everything I needed to know the first day I met him, but I didn't
Hmm.
listen to him for 6 months until he threatened to throw me out. He didn't
Right.
threaten to, he threw me out.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that just goes back when you know what success is and you know your definition, you're just not going to waste time with people, and it's not a reflection of you, it's a reflection of them and them not doing what they want to do. You sign up and it's like, well, why aren't you working? That's not my fault. Why are you not doing your part? Right. So I think that is great. Well, this has just been wonderful. What is the best way for everybody to get a hold of you?
Is that reading backwards or forwards? Is that
It's
mirror
reading
image?
right. So
Okay,
www.bfg3.com.
that's
And
my
then we got
website.
stores.
And down here you pay full retail. Down
Okay.
here, if they're interested in any of my sales training material, I repeat, I wrote it all down. You go to
Okay. So we got
stores.ebay.com.
stores.ebay.com at / Razone Books.
Ronzoni Books, right?
Ranzoni
RONZ,
Books.
right.
Okay.
And the reason that's Gigi Ronzoni, is able to sell books for less money and provide free shipping where I have to charge more and all, is that's Gigi, my wife. Ronzoni's her maiden name, and she
Oh.
doesn't have any costs. She goes into the warehouse and steals books, puts puts them up on eBay, and after she sells them, she hands them to my shipping department, and we pay to ship them. It's a sweet deal.
Oh.
I
Okay.
just can't find anybody who will do it for me. Michelle, I
And tell us
appreciate you
the
so
name of
much.
your book again. The book is
The
The Closers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the closers.
because
Yeah,
you showed it up here, but it's going to be audio also.
yeah.
So it's The Closers Part One.
Well,
Okay.
there's several parts, but the closers is the
I
series,
love it.
and those places you'll see the other options.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you again, Ben. It has been a pleasure. And I'm definitely going to stay glued to you because you are a wealth of wisdom. So
Yes,
I'm
I
so
am, and
excited.
handsome too, don't you think?
Yes. I'm so excited about us meeting, and I'm looking forward to us collaborating again in the future. Okay.
I would love that.
All right. Well, you have a wonderful day, and so glad to have you come on today. And I'll be in touch. We're going to have you back again. Okay.
Love to do it.
All right. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye bye.